the situation unfolding in the national capital and across the country really is mind-numbing, to say the least. How have we come to the situation where hospitals are sending out appeals with figures of how many hours of oxygen they've left and the number of patients who could potentially die if that oxygen runs out? One of these hospitals grew so desperate that they moved the Delhi High Court at 8 last evening, saying we have only 8 hours of oxygen left. We may not make it to the morning. In a hurried hearing, oxygen was then arranged to make it to them just in the nick of time. But that hasn't really solved the problem, has it? Because in the midst of this, you have more and more large hospitals today putting out messages of SOS. Fortis was one of them, Apollo is another one of them, who has said that we have just a few hours of oxygen left. In the midst of this, mid-size and smaller hospitals find themselves completely swamped and literally out of breath. Listen in to one of the top doctors at a mid-sized hospital in Delhi who almost broke down today.
There are about 12 patients which are on ventilator and BiPAP. There are 85 patients which are more than 5 liters per minute oxygen supplies people. There are other people, they are also there. There are cancer patients, there are cardiac patients, and ultimately it will be very deplorable condition, very unfortunate condition. We probably, you see, we as a doctor, we as a hospital, we are supposed to give life. If we cannot give them oxygen even, what is the situation? When patient comes to, patient will die. Patient will die.
So sir, any help you have got from Delhi?
We know they are trying to help, but there is no oxygen, sir. There is no oxygen. We know this. We know, everybody knows it. Even government is trying to help us. But ultimately, oxygen is to be generated and to supplied.
Now imagine the situation where a top doctor finds himself so helpless that he's coming in front of media cameras and saying that there is nothing that I can do. We know there's no oxygen. In the midst of this bizarre situation unfolding, where you have the Chief Minister of Delhi accusing the states of Haryana and Uttar Pradesh of not allowing their trucks to move and cross state borders. Haryana, on the other hand, says their quota of oxygen is being diverted to fulfill Delhi needs. What about them? The situation is just going from worse to even worse, unimaginable situation. So why is this happening? We want to speak to all stakeholders this evening and understand with a cool collective mind what really is going on. Let me begin by speaking with Dr. Ashutosh Raghuvanshi, CEO and MD of Fortis Healthcare. I have with me Rahul Mehra, senior advocate who's represented the Delhi government in the High Court in this case, Saket Tiku, who's the president of the All India Gas Manufacturing Association, and SC Garg, former finance secretary. Dr. Raghuvanshi, very good evening. Can you just take us through what the situation has been like and why you felt you needed to put out this appeal? How dire is the situation?
You know, Tamanna, this has been an unprecedented situation. The demand for oxygen went up by almost 4-folds in all the hospitals. And as a result of that, because of the sudden spurt in the demand, there was a huge gap in the demand and supply. So the situation started becoming alarming as the requirement of oxygen kept on going up. So from yesterday onwards, we have been seeing a severe strain on the situation. Yesterday evening, our 3 hospitals in the Delhi region were facing severe shortages, and they were down to about few hours of oxygen left, about 6 to 7 hours. But however, we were lucky at that because of the intervention of the local administrations and the state and center, the oxygen supply was resumed, and we had sufficient oxygen. However, in our major facility in Haryana and Gurgaon, we had a situation today where we were supposed to receive oxygen at 6 o'clock in the morning. And at that point of time, we had barely about 4 or 5 hours of oxygen left. And by the time, but we kept on getting very conflicting messages. We didn't have any clarity as to when we will have the arrival of the tankers. We were fortunate enough that the local administration helped us to gather gas cylinders from various other hospitals. So the neighborhood, other hospitals in the vicinity helped us in a big way by coming forward and sharing whatever little resources they had. And with that, we were able to tied up that situation. However, in the evening, we got 2 tankers of oxygen supplied, which was with the due intervention of our Honorable Chief Minister as well as the senior officials and local administration. So we find ourselves in a very sort of difficult situation where we have to make an appeal like this. I think we never ever imagined that a day will come when we will be, hospitals will be sort of gasping for oxygen in this manner. The situation is grim simply because the demand-supply ratio has been tilted all of a sudden. And everyone understands that. However, there has to be a centralized mechanism of distribution of oxygen to the hospitals, whether they are, it does not matter where the hospital is, whether it is in state A or B, but the oxygen requirement today is paramount. I think it's not time to analyze who is at fault. I think what is important is to find quick means, because 12 hours is also not a period which the patients can survive. So I think the focus should be on finding immediate solutions rather than trying to fix the blame.
You know, Dr. Raghuvanshi, I want to make it a point to really thank you for appearing on this show, for speaking with us. I can only imagine the immense strain you're under, but it's important because we need to get this information out to understand what's going on. While we're speaking, the Gangaram Hospital has put out a statement now saying they have oxygen supplies only till 1 a.m. They have 510 COVID patients and 142 of those are on high flow oxygen support. Dr. Raghuvanshi, I want to understand, what do doctors do, what do hospitals do in a situation like this? You literally have a ticking clock, a countdown to when you will get your next oxygen supply, and that is when you reach out, you use social media, you burn the phone lines, try to get some oxygen. But meanwhile, what's happening with the patients? Is there a possibility that we're actually losing lives because of this situation?
Not luckily, we have been fortunate because there are 2 layers of backup. So there's an oxygen which is there in the liquid oxygen plant, followed by a backup of cylinders, etc. And there are oxygen concentrators. So all these help us to manage. However, the requirements being so high with large number of patients being on ventilator, nasal high flow cannulas, when you have to give almost 60 liters of oxygen, which is extremely high, and there are a lot of leakages and wastages happen because of that. So in the meanwhile, what hospitals are doing is that we have postponed all the elective work. So there's no elective work or non-COVID related work being handled except for grave medical emergencies. So that way we are conserving as much as possible. Unfortunately, if the oxygen just gets over, there is not much the hospitals can do. And if a patient is totally dependent on oxygen, we can end up losing them. So that is exactly the reason why hospitals are so desperate and we are under so much stress to put up the SOS. But I must say that the authorities responded very, very quickly, and we averted a very, very grave situation.
Absolutely. I think it's also important to understand how we have come to this situation, why we are on such a tight budget of oxygen. A number of hospitals that I've also spoken to today talk about how they're literally living from day to day. So they're hoping that the amount they need shows up by the next day. And clearly it's because of the large number of patients coming in. Saket Tiku, I want to understand from you what the broader picture is. Because there's some reports that say India has the capacity to manufacture about 40% more than we need today because of COVID-19, but it's a supply-demand mismatch. We are manufacturing in the eastern part of the country. The demand is more in the western and other parts of the country. Can you explain to us what the broader picture is? Why are we finding ourselves in this situation?
Well, let me answer, your earlier question. Yes, it's true that Faridabad yesterday did not allow oxygen cylinders to be sent to Delhi. Uttarakhand did the same. Uttar Pradesh did the same. And then I had to kind of flag this issue through DPIT, Ministry of Commerce, to the Home Secretary. Only after his intervention, the supplies were allowed to be sent to Delhi. Now, this was yesterday. And the same thing was repeated in the morning in Panipat, and one of our units in one of our member companies is in Panipat. They didn't allow the oxygen to be sent to Delhi. Now, this is not only the New Delhi case, it is happening in many other parts of the country. In fact, in one state, one district collector is not allowing the oxygen to be sent to another district collector. This is something, please understand, the entire GOI or DPIT, Ministry of Commerce, has done an excellent job in mapping all the states. Now, every state has been told that oxygen will be supplied to you from this particular plant. Now, yes, you might disagree, or you might say, listen, I need, this quota is less, I need more, but this plan is being reviewed after every 3-4 days. Now, what is happening, some of the district authorities, they have turned rogue and they have decided, well, it's like a Wild West. If the vehicle is passing through my territory, I will not allow it to go to the other state. Now, this is the issue. There are clear-cut instructions given even by Mr. Ajay Balla on September 18, wherein it was clearly mentioned you cannot stop the oxygen truck from going one place to another. But there is no respect for that letter. It is not being implemented. A lot of secretaries a lot of district authorities are doing what they feel is correct. They feel they are responsible for the lives of the people who are in under their jurisdiction. They are right. We are not denying. But if the oxygen plant is in your territory, does not mean that you own it. Does not mean that you will not give it to another state. Now, who has to regulate it? Please understand, our systems are in place. DPIT, Ministry of Commerce, Empowered Group has made certain plans. But if you do not allow those systems to work, the entire thing will collapse. It has a cascading effect. You can't keep on stopping the supplies. I'm not trying to politicize it. I'm not saying, the BJP states are doing this with the non-BJP states. No. It is one officer who thinks that his people in his district are more important because he is responsible for the lives of the people in his state. We do understand, I understand it. But if all the states are doing it, trust me, the entire day of mine was spent in getting these things sorted. So many calls coming from so many districts. Hey, listen, my vehicle has been stopped. This state is not allowing this vehicle to go to another state. Entire day we have to flag it off to the Home Secretary's office. Home Secretary has given clear-cut instructions. Government of India has made plans. The states have to follow. I mean, not all of them. Some states are doing a marvelous job. Maharashtra state is doing an excellent job. Kerala is doing an excellent job. So we need to follow this pattern. This is one. If you do not, if you don't discipline yourself, these matters are going to get worse. Now, the second thing is, yes, we cannot enhance. We can ramp up the production up to a certain level. Right now, the Steel Authority of India is helping us. Private steel plants are helping us. The issue now is the oxygen surplus states are in the eastern part of the country, and the deficit states are in the other side of the country, like Maharashtra, Gujarat. So it is taking us huge amount of time in trunking the liquid from deficit states to the surplus states. Now, what do we do? You see, we can't ramp up the production overnight. We can't put up these cryogenic, plants overnight. It takes a lot of time.
No, Mr. Tiku, if I just may intervene. if I just may intervene, give me a picture of what the demand and supply mismatch is right now. How much are states asking for? Does that much oxygen manufacturing capacity at least exist in our country right now? Is the oxygen there and it's just difficult to transport it, or does the oxygen capacity not exist at this point?
We have oxygen right now at the moment. Now the industrial oxygen has been diverted for the medical use, since we have capped the use of industrial oxygen. But we are not supplying to the industries, barring the critical industries. We have. The bigger question is, we can't dip in our stocks. The thing is, for how long will it last? It will last. I don't want to create a panic kind of a situation. It will last. The only thing is, we need to behave properly. The people who are supposed to uphold the law need to behave properly. There are clear-cut instructions of GOI. Now, the other issue is my request to Ministry of Health and all the doctors on this panel and otherwise. Please understand, there is a huge mismatch between the active cases and the consumption pattern of the states. For example, why I'm saying the Maharashtra has done a wonderful job, be it their, the Secretary, MED, Transport Commissioner, FDA Commissioner, they're doing a marvelous job. 7 lakh cases, active cases in the state, and they're consuming around 1,300 or 1,400 tons per day. Okay. Now look at the other states with 80,000 cases, they are consuming 900 tons. And now they're demanding, by 30th April, we want 1,500 tons. This cannot keep on going. We need to understand very clearly, government has to come in, Ministry of Health. I'm not a doctor, so I can't, dictate or tell or suggest what flow rate has to be given to the patients. What I'm trying to say, the government needs
exactly,
Mr.
Tiku, you've said it correct. I think you'd have to leave it to the doctors to decide what they have to give patients. And that would be in every specific case. I want to come back to you on that point.
Hang on.
I want to come back to you on that point. Yeah.
Please. See, why Maharashtra is giving a low flow rate to the patients, why other states are giving high flow rate. I'm not a doctor, I don't understand it. But only thing I understand, our oxygen stocks are depleting. Government needs to come in and recommend the flow rate, and all other states need to follow, if it's possible. Otherwise, we can't keep on. One state with 70,000 cases is consuming 1,000 tons a day. Another 7 lakh cases is consuming 1,200 tons. Kerala is consuming 150 tons, 100,000 tons. Let's learn from Kerala. Why don't we see the oxygen management from
I'll come back to that point, and I will get Dr. Raghuvanshi to explain that to us about what's happening, because you don't have the expertise, as you said, and nor do I. But I want to bring in Rahul Mehra on a very important aspect on what has been happening, and we've made an attempt on this show to bring every key stakeholder and representative of every key stakeholder onto the show so that we can understand what's happening. The finger pointing, the criticizing, all of that can continue, but we first have to understand what is going on. Rahul Mehra, you were representing the government of Delhi yesterday in the High Court. We've had several High Courts across the country who felt the need to step in and tell the administration, the local government, the central government, that you better make sure lives are saved. Beg, borrow, steal, or get the oxygen there. I want to ask you that, have we come to a situation where the courts need to intervene, and what is the extent to which they can ensure that lives are actually saved? At the end of the day, it's up to the local administration to execute all of this.
Well, you're absolutely right. See, what is happening right now in the country is that we are in a state of medical emergency, and I think sooner than later we should declare it so that everybody arises to that fact and is aware of the fact that, it's not just any other ordinary situation, and we will tide over it if we do not treat it as an emergency. So, the very fact that we are even today thinking that, okay, we can do this in 2 days, in 4 days, in a week's time, in 10 days' time, that attitude needs to go. From days and weeks, we need to start working on days and hours and minutes, because that's the situation. And we need to be alive to the situation that human lives are going to be lost. In fact, as we speak, there might be happening, because every few minutes there's one SOS call from some hospital, some nursing home, some big super specialty hospital saying that we are left with half an hour. We have exhausted our oxygen supply. We are running on a 2 hour or a 4 hour or a 8 hour or a 10 hour supply. Ideally, a hospital should have at least, I would say, 5 days if you have to be in a happy situation of reserve. Otherwise, at least as a bare minimum, it has to be 3 days. And right now we are talking in minutes and hours. So you can understand the alarming situation. Just imagine if, despite all efforts, God forbid, and I'm not being an alarmist, I don't want to scare, I think we all are scared to the core, each one of us is. But at the end of the day, we are responsible citizens. And therefore, human lives are paramount. And I'm glad and I'm so happy that Delhi High Court and various other high courts are actually leading the way. They are actually upholding the right to life, which is enshrined in our constitution. Each one of us have that fundamental right. And therefore, what I'm saying is that there are certain issues that we can actually tackle. I do appreciate that.
I seem to have lost the line there with Rahul Mehra. We'll try and get his audio back. Just a quick, we'll try and get his audio back. Just a quick word here from SC Garg. Mr. Garg, you've been in government. Now the sticky situation is that state is supposed to be health is supposed to be a state subject. But as far as COVID-19 is concerned, a lot of the resources are controlled and distributed by the central government, whether it's vaccinations. Now it will open up from 1st May, but until now, key medication and even things like oxygen need to be centrally controlled. What is your reading of the current situation, the way that Mr. Tiku is describing that district administration is going rogue? He's called the situation like the Wild West, where one officer thinks he has to look after his people. It's become like each state fending for themselves.
See, I think it's a case of our collective failure. We just did not anticipate that the cases would rise so much. In the month of January, early February, December, we were in a way celebrating that we probably won the battle over COVID-19. And this kind of sort of rise and surge was completely unanticipated. Everybody forgot about it. Now, what you see today is the result of that unanticipation. Today, if you have 3,15,000 cases a day, even if a fraction of that goes for the hospital, you need beds, you need oxygens, you need drugs. And that seems to have made us, the entire system collapse. You said rightly, in a way, the central government tried to sort of manage that the entire thing, the entire show is run by them, whether it's the vaccine or drugs or otherwise. The powers under the Disaster Management Act, the powers, other powers under the fiscal arrangements were seen to be taken over by the central government. I think what we need to do today is that I think we should listen to what Mr. Tiku was saying very carefully, that today in this big situation of shortage, there is this battle, maramari going on, and we are probably running out of these stocks. The ability to make oxygen in a day is possibly far less than the oxygen demand per day today. And what is going to make that situation into next week or next 15 days is something which we should very critically and carefully manage. I think we should also be managing to think that the cases would probably rise. I don't want to sound alarmist, but it's not inconceivable to think that the cases might rise to 4 to 5 lakh a day, and you may have double the people of today in running for hospitals and oxygen. So, and then if there is a gap, then how do we manage to increase the supply and regulate the demand also? I think in
Absolutely.
this shortages,
Yes, I get your point. I get your point. I think the important points coming on board, and Dr. Raghuvanshi said it very well, that it's time to look for solutions. Dr. Raghuvanshi, I think people will apportion blame. It's only natural. People will think back today and ask themselves, why have we come to this situation where top hospitals of the country have to reach out on social media, have to move court saying that please help us. You have doctors who are breaking down on camera. So people will ask why this has happened. But the question is, what are the solutions? Now, Saket Tiku made a point earlier where he suggested that all states are not using oxygen correctly, and some are asking for more than could be required. Now, that is a point that a medical expert only can comment on. And what is your response to his statement?
No, what Mr. Tiku said makes sense, because theoretically, if you assume that X number of patients are requiring oxygen therapy, then it should be a finite quantity which they require. So there cannot be such dramatic differences between unit one and between one state and the other state. So definitely this is something which needs to be looked into. Clinical protocols sometimes require or create a situation of wastage. As I earlier said, that when you use high flow nasal cannulas, it requires a very high level of flows. Whereas the same patient could also be managed by non-invasive ventilation, which requires less degree of oxygen. So these are some of the things where the clinical condition determines what therapy you are going to give to the patient, and also the experience of the doctors and the general facilities, etc. So all these have to be kept into consideration. But Mr. Tiku's point that there should be some kind of a guideline or some kind of a protocol as to how the oxygen therapies are to be given will be helpful, will certainly remove the wastages, because there is a finite capacity which we can create oxygen. Even the industrial oxygen being diverted towards medical use may not, be sufficient. So, and as I was saying earlier, that the oxygen consumption has gone up by about 3 to 4 times, at least in our hospitals. So, which is because of the number of patients. But definitely, depending on the protocols which are being used, there can be variations. And we are very strictly monitoring within our network. But Mr. Tiku's suggestion is something which I agree with, that there should be some kind of clinical protocols which should be defined. Of course, after that, the decision should be left to the individual clinicians. But that could help us in reducing the waste as much as possible.
Dr. Raghuvanshi, what is happening to non-COVID patients right now? You spoke about how all elective and non-emergency treatments have been put on hold, and one can, safely assume that's happening in major hospitals in large parts of the country. Isn't this going to really impact non-COVID patients with chronic diseases?
No, absolutely. There's no doubt that happened during the first wave also. The unrelated to COVID mortality rates and morbidity rates went up. And I think the same thing is going to happen now as well. So the other patients, like especially those who are suffering from chronic diseases and or who require chronic treatment, like kidney patients and oncology patients, cancer patients, they are really suffering. But unfortunately, current situation is almost a war-like situation. And there is some type of triaging which you have to do and take care of the immediate need of whosoever you can, and minimize the loss of life. And that is what is the priority right now.
Mr. Tiku, Give us an idea of how we can improve the situation. Let's talk about solutions. Now, one solution you talked about is how states should adhere to the guidelines, how district authorities shouldn't take matters into their own hand and, avoid the wild, wild west kind of situation. How can we also improve the speed of transportation? Like you mentioned, the oxygen is being manufactured in the eastern part of the country, but demand is more elsewhere. What do you suggest we do to improve the speed of that oxygen reaching?
You see, let me tell you, we have limitations with the installed capacity. I keep on saying, and I will repeat myself, that oxygen is not unlimited. Use of oxygen needs to be rationalized. Everybody needs to understand this. Two, yes, out-of-box thinking has been done by GOI. They have flagged, recently the oxygen rail was started from Kalomboli to Vizag for the first time in the history of our country. Two things have happened. The first, we put these oxygen mobile tankers on the rakes and sent them from New Mumbai to Vizag. This was the first time. Today, Air Force has airlifted one oxygen tanker and taken it to Durgapur. It will be filled in the Durgapur, brought back to New Delhi. So lot of things are being experimented, but it's an empty tanker. We can't airlift this cryogenic liquid, we can't airlift it. We have some safety hazards there, but an empty tanker has been taken from New Delhi, flown to Durgapur, in one of the steel plants there. It will be brought back to Delhi, but it will be by road. Once the oxygen is filled, it will be brought back. So we are cutting down on the transportation time. So a lot of these things, and there are other things, once they take some shape, then I'll be able to talk about it. GOI is doing whatever they can do, they're doing it. We have some of the finest officers we have in DPIT, Ministry of Commerce, or even an empowered group. But as I said, the immediate solution to me is oxygen needs to be rationalized. That is the immediate solution, as far as I see it.
Just one word on capacity. What is the capacity we have available right now in the country? What is the requirement, and what is our timeline to increase this capacity?
See, as I said, from 850 metric tons of medical oxygen being used per day in March 2020. In September, 3,000 tons of metric tons of oxygen being used per day. And yesterday, we crossed 6,000 metric tons of oxygen. We have oxygen. Now this industrial oxygen is being, the oxygen meant for the industries is being diverted. I do not want to give you any figure, because unnecessarily people start doing the backward calculation and then a panic kind of a situation, is created. I do not want to give the figure of our total installed capacity in the country, but yes, it is enough. But unfortunately, it is our stocks are at the wrong places, and it is taking us time to ferry them from the deficit areas to the surplus areas. We need to discipline ourselves. At the same time, the people also need to be responsible. We can't go to Kumbh Melas, we can't go to election rallies, we can't do social functions, and after 5-7 days, we are looking for a bed in the hospital. So
no, I get your point completely, but I would hesitate to blame the people for election rallies and Kumbh Melas. People behave depending on the signals they get from the top. You told the country that you have to stay at home, people stayed at home. If you tell everyone we are unlocked and we are holding a function, we are holding a rally, please come, then people will come. It is, at the end of it, you cannot blame the people then for doing what was perfectly legal and considered okay to do till 2 weeks ago. So let us look inwards and see where that blame lies, sometimes in the guise of saying that everyone is to blame. we should not forget to see that who is truly responsible. I want to thank all of you for joining us on this discussion. I hope that those who are watching it will now have a clearer picture of what is going on beyond the panic and chaos which is out there sometimes. We'll take a very short break, but on the other side, you will hear from R.S. Sharma, who is the CEO of the National Health Authority, on how exactly the co-win system will work for registrations of the vaccine from the 1st of May.